Meet the Parents was almost a collaboration between the world's biggest director and the world's biggest movie star in the mid-1990s. Meet the Parents turns 25 years old this month, so here are some things I bet you never knew about it. The story behind Meet the Parents starts at the Second City Improv Theater in Chicago in the 1980s. Future filmmaker Greg Galena was taking classes there, and he improvised a scene in which a young man meets his girlfriend's father. He later expanded that idea into a short film called The Vase, about a young man meeting both of his girlfriend's parents, in which he breaks their prized vase. He and his collaborator, Mary Ruth Clark, then turned that into an 80-page screenplay called Meet the Parents. They got that script in front of comedian Emo Phillips, who agreed to produce it. This original version of Meet the Parents was then filmed on a $35,000 budget in and around Chicago in 1991. Galena shot it on 16mm in just 2 weeks, doing many scenes in one take. The final runtime of the movie was just 76 minutes. This original Meet the Parents then got a very limited release in a few theaters in the US and UK in 1992, and the handful of critics that saw it gave it average to positive reviews. By the way, you can watch this original Meet the Parents on YouTube today, but for years it was unavailable because once Universal acquired the rights, it buried the film and refused to distribute it. Anyway, back in the early 1990s, the indie film caught the eye of producer Nancy Tenenbaum, who executive produced Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotape in 1989. Tenenbaum acquired the rights to Meet the Parents and started sending it around to major players in Hollywood to see if anyone wanted to remake it. Soderbergh was interested, and he brought it to Universal, who officially acquired the rights in 1995. Soderbergh actually brought on Galena and Clark to rewrite the script for mainstream audiences. They received a story by credit on the eventual Ben Stiller movie. Anyway, Soderbergh ended up leaving the project to make Out of Sight instead, but Universal decided to keep developing it. It hired Jim Hertzfeld to write a new script. Hertzfeld had previously written on It's Garry Shandling's Show and Married with Children. Hertzfeld expanded Galena's screenplay and finished his first draft by early 1996. He then brought it to director Jay Roach. Universal didn't want to hire Roach because they didn't think he was experienced enough. Also, Universal was hesitant because around this time, Steven Spielberg started sniffing around the project. Spielberg considered producing and directing Meet the Parents, and he wanted Jim Carrey to play Greg. Spielberg was the biggest director on earth at this time, coming off of Jurassic Park and Schindler's List, while Carrey was also a megastar dominating the mid-90s with The Mask, Dumb and Dumber, Ace Ventura, The Cable Guy, and Liar Liar. They also considered Al Pacino for the father-in-law, but Spielberg and Carrey's involvement never got past the planning stages. That said, one of Jim Carrey's suggestions became a signature joke throughout the franchise. In Greg Galena's original Meet the Parents movie, the character of Greg didn't have a last name, but it was Jim Carrey who invented the last name Fokker during a brainstorming session. Anyway, in 1998, Universal went back to Jay Roach to direct. At that point, Roach was committed to making the sports dramedy Mystery Alaska, but once that wrapped up in early 1999, he was able to focus on Meet the Parents. And then it came time to cast the movie. Robert De Niro had just proven his comedy chops in Analyze This and Rocky and Bullwinkle, so Universal thought he'd be a no-brainer to play father-in-law Jack Burns. And Roach had no problem with that, of course. De Niro was looking for more comedy roles after those two movies, but he also felt a little bit hesitant about joining Meet the Parents. Thankfully, the actor's Tribeca business partner Jane Rosenthal urged him to do it. De Niro turned down Any Given Sunday to appear in Meet the Parents. Christopher Walken, meanwhile, was the second choice if De Niro had said no, and Anthony Hopkins, Alan Alda, and Harrison Ford were also all considered at one point. After signing on, it was De Niro himself who came up with the famous polygraph scene. Once Jim Carrey left the movie, they considered Rob Schneider, Martin Lawrence, Adam Sandler, Eddie Murphy, and Mike Myers. They actually offered Greg to Mike Myers, but he declined, so Roach instead turned to Ben Stiller. He said, quote, "I saw Meet the Parents as an anxiety dream, and in my view, nobody plays that kind of material better than Ben." The director also liked Stiller's ability to improvise, and it was Ben Stiller's idea to make Greg a male nurse. Back when Jim Carrey was interested in the movie, Jim Hertzfeld had adjusted the script to include way more physical comedy. Ben Stiller didn't think he'd be able to pull that off, so they took most of that stuff out. And then, in fact, the production hired John Hamburg to do even more rewrites as to better fit De Niro and Stiller's specific verbal styles. Hamburg worked on the script even after the movie started shooting. Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor also did an uncredited rewrite on the screenplay. The poem that Robert De Niro reads about his mother and the climactic airport sequence came from Payne and Taylor. Julia Stiles auditioned for Pam, and then Naomi Watts was seriously considered, but instead the filmmakers went with Terry Polo because they didn't think Watts was sexy enough. The role of Jinx the cat was played by two 5-year-old Himalayan cats named Bailey and Misha. Himalayans are notoriously difficult to train, and the trainers asked Roach to pick a different type of cat, but he liked how the Himalayans looked on camera, so that was that. Universal then gave the movie a $55 million budget, and Meet the Parents started filming on November 8th, 1999 in New York. They shot in the affluent Long Island neighborhoods of Oyster Bay, Old Brookville, and Port Washington. They also shot at the Westchester Westchester County Regional Airport and on sound stages in Brooklyn, where the art department built the full interior of the Burns house. They wanted a tasteful Republican feel, so they used a red, white, and blue color scheme. De Niro and the two cats formed a strong bond on set. De Niro at first considered training a cat himself during pre-production, but then he realized how difficult that would have been, so during production he hid treats in his pockets for the cats, and he would play with them in between scenes. Meanwhile, De Niro intentionally kept things icy between himself and Ben Stiller. The two of them didn't do much socializing on set, so they'd feel less chummy in the movie. Stiller said it was a little bit intimidating working with De Niro, but also he has a great sense of humor, and I think that's the biggest surprise about him. Ben Stiller was very uncomfortable in the clothes that he wore in the movie, and director Jay Roach said that was done on purpose to make the actor uneasy. Jack, meanwhile, was given soft sweaters to contrast the tough guy roles De Niro usually played. Roach also refused to tell Ben Stiller whether De Niro approved of his acting. In the script, Greg was originally going to propose at a Cubs game at Wrigley Field, but that was deemed too expensive, so they shot that scene outside the school instead. Life imitated art a little bit. During a break from filming, Ben Stiller flew home to Los Angeles to propose to Christine Taylor. She thought he was still in New York, and he surprised her at home with a path of candles and rose petals. Meet the Parents wrapped filming on February 8th, 2000, and Universal wanted the movie to be rated PG-13. But because the name Fokker appeared so many times, the MPAA wanted to give it an R rating. In order to prevent that, the filmmakers did some research and made a list of real people with the last name Fokker, and that convinced the MPAA to drop the rating down to PG-13. Meet the Parents opened on 2,614 screens on October 6th, 2000. It did $28.6 million domestic opening weekend, which was an October record at that time. It then stayed at number 1 for 4 weekends and went on to gross $330 million total worldwide, which is more than 6 times its budget and a huge success for a comedy. It was the 7th highest grossing movie of 2000 on the domestic charts. And then it made another $200 million in home video sales in 2001. Ironically, Greg's airplane rant was cut from the version shown on airplanes, likely due to the use of the word bomb. Critics really liked it. Today, 85% of the 147 reviews assessed by Rotten Tomatoes are positive. It was nominated for 1 Oscar for Best Song for Randy Newman's A Fool in Love, but it lost to Bob Dylan's Things Have Changed from Wonder Boys. But Ben Stiller won the MTV Movie Award for Best Comedic Performance. The film inspired a real cat toilet training product called Litter Kwitter, which sold over 750,000 units. It also led to the 2002 NBC reality show Meet the Folks, where fathers interrogated their daughters' would-be suitors with a polygraph test. In 2005, an American Airlines flight from Florida to Puerto Rico was diverted home after a flight attendant found a crumpled up napkin in which someone had written "Bomb, bomb, bomb, meet the parents." A bomb squad was then brought in to sweep the plane, and the FBI ended up questioning all 176 passengers on board. Meet the Parents then became a full-on franchise. In 2004, we got the sequel, Meet the Fockers, with Dustin Hoffman and Barbra Streisand joining the cast as Greg's parents. It made $522 million at the box office against an $80 million budget. And then in 2007, we got Little Fockers, about Greg and Pam's life as parents. It did $310 million against a $100 million budget. And then the franchise was dormant for almost 20 years, but in 2024, we learned that the original cast was in talks to return for a 4th movie. Fokker-in-Law is shooting from August to November 2025. John Hamburg is directing, and Ariana Grande and Skylar Gisondo have joined the cast. It's got a release date of November 25th, 2026. Thanks for watching this video. If you've made it to the end, drop a Fokker in the comments. For more movie histories, check out the attached playlist, and for the latest pop culture news, subscribe to my newsletter.